Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another round and another month of a LinkedIn live stream with your friends here at Next After. We are joined by the one and only Kevin Peters. Kevin, welcome to, I think, your first Next After live LinkedIn live stream, at least.
LinkedIn live stream. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been a plenty of the old ones in the past with lots of holiday antics and all that sort of stuff. Glad to.
Green screens with heads cut off. They're always great. Nothing,
Yeah,
nothing says professional like the Next After live streams.
that sounds a little bit more gruesome than it really was in reality, but that is pretty true. Uh, we're thrilled that you're joining us today. We're going to try to make the most of your time. We'll give a couple minutes for everyone to be able to join us here. But we're going to spend all of our time today talking about Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday just happened this week. In case you didn't know about it, I think it's almost impossible to exist on planet Earth and not hear about Giving Tuesday on the day of, at least at this point. But we're thrilled you're here. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the data and doing a deep dive into what actually happened. Before we dive any deeper, I would love if you would jump into the comments and let us know a couple things. What organization are you from? Where in the world are you tuning in from today? And then how are you feeling about Giving Tuesday? Just anecdotally, we've seen organizations that absolutely crushed goals.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen organizations that were way down. We've seen organizations that were flat. So whatever your story is today, you've got good company, because there's people feeling all like the full spectrum. So let us know how you feeling about Giving Tuesday. Kevin, how are you feeling about Giving Tuesday?
This one has been a weird year. I mean, it's a weird year for a lot of fundraising. We're seeing stats all over the place with regard to things like click-through rate and cost per CPM on social media has changed, different than years. Revenue's different. Donor, heck, Nathan and I were going back and forth when analyzing the different results, and the numbers kept changing because literally people kept recording more gifts 3 days after Giving Tuesday. So this is going to be an interesting one to look back on when we're done too.
We were just chatting about how, I mean, there's people want to come out immediately as soon as Giving Tuesday is over and go report on here's what happened and here's what we think is happening. And the numbers are changing all the time as data gets processed and gifts actually come in and land in the CRM and then get reported on and all that sort of stuff. I see lots of comments coming in. I'll give some shout outs here. We've got a friend, Chris, who said that they sucked it up on Giving Tuesday. So I'm sorry, Chris. Hopefully we'll cast.
We've all been there, buddy. We've all been there.
Hopefully we can cast a vision of hope for you, because there's more to come in December than just on Giving Tuesday.
Turns out it's not the most important day, like many would have us believe.
Right. We've got Vine Maple Place joining us from Maple Valley, Washington. They're feeling good. They did great, which is awesome to hear. We've got Douglas from Quality Life Concepts in Montana. Did better with our annual letter than with Giving Tuesday. Okay. I mean, hey, that's good signs for year end, whether it's came in on the 3rd or the 4th or whatever the day, it's still revenue coming in. That's a good thing. Anyone you want to shout out here in the comments, Kevin, that you can see?
I was interested I like Larry's comment on emails taking a hit on deliverability issues, but overall fundraising was strong.
Oh,
I have a feeling a lot of people took that hit because the shifts in the email algorithms and what they consider email versus spam versus promotions is a moving target.
Well, and probably a good flag for what's to come too, because at the end of that comment, if email hadn't been a problem, we would have exceeded last year's revenue. So maybe time to think about what you can do even outside of email to get more attention in such a chaotic season. Mary says that California is a little better than last year, up by 30%. I assume that means you are in California and your organization is up by 30%. I don't know if the state was doing fundraising.
The elevation has shifted to get above it's no longer a beach state.
The heck of a lots of things. We've got a lot to cover today. We'll keep giving you shout outs in the comments as we see things come in. I see Mike making a comment on what even is an 8x impact match. It is amazing the level of matching.
Nobody knows. That's what makes it so provocative.
I did see a text on Giving Tuesday that made me laugh that basically said, we're not sure, or I don't know what it say. It said, find out if your gift will be doubled or tripled.
Ooh.
Did they No, if it's
Or cut in half by 50%. Really add the fear of loss into it. We got all the triggers.
In their defense, I clicked through and I went and at least looked at the page, so it won the click. Well, let's dive into some things, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a moment. And for those of you who haven't been on a Next After live stream before, I just want to share a little bit about who we are, not for the sake of just talking about us, but just to set the table of what you can expect. Every month as we come together, we host these live streams. We talk a lot about experimentation and data and how to grow your fundraising program as a whole. And at Next After, at the end of the day, we really do one thing, which is that we help nonprofits grow their digital fundraising. We do that in three primary ways, where we are first and foremost a digital first agency. So we help nonprofits day in and day out with everything from emails to advertising, donor acquisition to donor retention, and everything in between. And right now we are spending a heck of a lot of time focused on Giving Tuesday and the year-end season as a whole. It's like, all hands on deck, everyone pulling out all the stops to see results grow for organizations each day this year. Now, we do a lot of A/B testing and experimentation within our day-to-day work, because at the end of the day, we don't want to just operate on gut instinct and gut feel about what might lead to better giving. We want to decode what actually works to grow giving. We do that through A/B testing and experimentation. We also conduct firsthand research where we go try to understand what's happening out in the nonprofit space right now. How are nonprofits trying to grow giving? And so we're kind of taking the pulse of the nonprofit landscape through a lot of benchmarking reports. And everything we learn from our day-to-day work with nonprofits like yours, A/B testing, the first-party research we conduct, we turn into training like today's live stream, as well as a lot of different courses and blogs and tools and all sorts of things, because we want to go equip you and as many nonprofits as we possibly can with what's actually working to grow giving and generosity. As of about 45 minutes ago, when I took this screenshot, we have 7,680 online fundraising experiments logged in Kevin's creation, which is called Winston Knows. It is a tool.
Baby.
He's an old looking baby, but he is cute. But this is where we log every experiment that we run. And we have lots of other outside organizations as well that are discovering the power of A/B testing to grow their program, and are using a tool like Winston to keep track of all their learnings about what works to grow giving and generosity. Now, I want to hand things over to Kevin for a moment to talk about AVID, because this is a tool and a platform that has kind of been birthed out of Next After over the past couple of years. And that's really where we're going to spend all of our time today. So Kevin, can you tell us about AVID?
AVID's my new baby. That looks like a baby to some degree, far more so than Winston is. Now, AVID, we had our official public launch back in September. It was something, though, that we've been building internally at Next After for going on 5 years. We created AVID for a very specific purpose, to solve a very specific problem we kept having with our nonprofits. And that was, simply put, we didn't know if we were doing a good job. It's easy to look and launch an email and say, I made this many gifts, this much revenue, but it's hard when you start looking at the big picture. Meaning, if I don't send this email, what happens to revenue to my donors? If I exclude my donors from getting emails because they haven't been engaging, what does that do to their direct mail giving? If I decide to cancel an event, what's the downstream impact of that beyond just the instant donations that I get from it? So what AVID does is it aggregates data from multiple different sources: CRMs, email platforms, donation pages, email capture, paid social, website, you name it. Creates a golden record. At that point in time, really what we shoot for is visualizing all that data in as many different ways as we can. It creates at any point 400 to 500 different charts, an overwhelming amount of data, honestly. But the goal is the system can then identify, here's what you need to know. Because if we've looked at it every which way, we can present you with just the 5 most important things today, things that you can then take action on. Because the idea behind AVID is not just to visualize data, not just to report, is to be able to take action. You can right-click on your pie chart and say, send this to Facebook, send this back to my email platform. Keep your segments in sync. And really what it does is it helps you make the data you already have actionable and really make it more useful for your fundraising. It allows you to have personalized communications rather than mass market email blasts.
Right. Well, we're really grateful for it, and the amount of empowerment that even just the past 6 months, as more and more people have hopped on board the Avid train, the empowerment it just gives to go have a clear understanding of what's actually happening and be able to take meaningful action on it. So you can see on the screen, I've got a QR code up, and you just saw kind of a ticker across the bottom. You are more than welcome to go scan that QR code or go to nextafter.com/avid and go sign up for a free Avid account in order to get real-time benchmarks for life and get access to the Giving Tuesday and year-end benchmarks that we're going to be diving into here in a moment. There's a whole lot more to Avid than just those benchmarks reports, as Kevin was just saying, but those benchmarks will be free to you for life. You go ahead and sign up for that today. So we'll leave that up on the screen for a moment. But Kevin, let's dive into some data. I'm going to switch over to the actual Avid dashboard so folks can see it and give you the controls here. What's the headline? Because there's a lot of different kind of thoughts and feelings about what Giving Tuesday was like the other day. What's the headline from what you're seeing in the data?
The biggest headline I would say and point out on it is that Giving Tuesday is no longer just a day. When we look at Giving Tuesday in the microcosm of one single day, the results are very different than if you say, let's just look at like a 7-day window, because people are no longer treating it as a single spike in giving. They're treating it as a communication series. So we'll be able to dig into it. And so just give a little more context on the benchmarks we're going to look at here. In this point, I mentioned before, it's evolving to the day, to the minute. When I refresh, the numbers may change slightly because more get reported. So something to check back on. But right now, we have 65 different organizations in this. We split them by vertical. We split them by size. We've reported $114 million in revenue from those organizations. Over 500,000 unique donors across. Well, maybe not unique. They probably gave to 2 different organizations. But the reason, just as a kind of a note of why we even make these benchmarks, I always had an issue with benchmarks in the past because I've always said the best way to get better is to compare against yourself. I believe that. But the reality is benchmarks provide context. If I said you have a 50% retention rate, the first question is that good or bad? Which is fair. This allows you to understand, how do I compare to similar? And even with Giving Tuesday, the other thing that we ran into is most benchmarks are out of date the moment they're published. And so our goal with this on Giving Tuesday, on year end, we'll show it, is to provide live up to yesterday. How do I compare to similar organizations? It tells you, should I have better messaging for my major donors? Am I acquiring as many new donors as similar organizations? And if not, what can I do differently? So that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah. Well, as I've just been poking around, it's incredible how much data is kind of at my fingertips to be able to drill into and compare and contrast, and that's incredible. So let's dive into some of the insights and observations. How did we do on Giving Tuesday? And I know we'll kind of look at Giving Tuesday itself, and we'll look at the larger period. And I think there's 2 different stories, maybe competing to tell there. But what did we see on the day of?
Not so good, Bob. At a high level, revenue was down 6% over the year, and active donors was down 25% for the day of Giving Tuesday. Now, what's interesting about these 2 stats is they're not as connected as you would think. You normally think, oh, revenue's down, so donors must be down. But the reality is, when we look and we split it out by the different giving levels, on Giving Tuesday, 4 out of 5 donors, $4 out of $5, are given by major donors. We define major donors on this one as anyone who's given $10,000 or more in a given year. And so they provide a significant number, yet 9 out of 10 donors are broad-based, giving less than $1,000 as their highest level gift ever. And so while revenue may be down and donors are down, the donors that are down don't provide as significant as an impact as the major donors in their revenue.
Right. And that was one thing I was just observing, is like trying to look at the changes in average gift size and the changes in, like, revenue per donor, which I know we're going to get into that stuff. But I do think that's fascinating, especially when historically, this has been a day that at least has been talked about to be a big day where giving happens largely through social media. And it's a big day for like reaching new people and that sort of stuff. That doesn't seem to exactly be the case when you go look at the kind of donor cohort breakdown as you're looking at. I would imagine, at least, you're probably not seeing a lot of people giving a major gift who just found out about your organization through a Facebook ad, most likely.
I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but what we actually saw is Giving Tuesday is no longer as big of a deal for acquiring new donors as it was in the past.
Yeah.
4 out of 5 donors that gave on Giving Tuesday had given in the last 12 months already. This was their second gift.
That stuff is really interesting because you're right. That has been like the historical narrative, and there's been good research to show that in the past that it's a decent day for acquisition. So we'll drill into that. But okay, so you've kind of painted the picture for what happened day of. What's happening if we look at like the larger giving period around Giving Tuesday?
So if we back it out, and the way we frame this up is I'm looking at Giving Tuesday on this day, 7 days prior, so the week leading up to it, and then the day after. And so if you look at an expanded time frame on this, Giving Tuesday is actually up about $700,000, $800,000 year over year.
Yeah.
When you look at it, that's an 11% jump in revenue for this time period window.
Right.
Now, the donor side of things is only up slightly, up 3% on donors. But the other aspect that you see on this one, which I find fascinating, this chart looks at the average number of donors who are giving on a single month. You can see in the past, there were specific, spikes that would happen. On 2022, it was 3 days prior. On 2023, there was a spike that jumped 300 donors. And this year, it was a far more steady buildup to the day. But that day was still below all the other previous recent history gifts.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different way of approaching it. And you kind of see, I don't know if it's a change in the way we message, where we used to send out an email 2 days before, you can give ahead of time. I remember the Giving Foundation used to say, you promote giving a pledge gift that they enter their credit card and doesn't get charged till the day of.
Oh,
Used to be a common messaging tactic. I don't know if that's changing or if we've just said, let's go all in on this single day.
right. I mean, the dashed line there is at 2022, or with the big spike 3 days before. I mean, that would fall, what is that, the Sunday before?
Yep.
And then you've got in the following year a spike the next day. It is really interesting to see that in the lead up. But yeah, you've got this kind of steady growth curve over time leading up to it. And it seems even this year, like with the exception of those spikes, it's like average donors per day was pacing ahead of the past couple of years, with the exception of those big peaks.
Yeah, you have to get out the peaks and valleys to see. There's just kind of a ebb and flow with it.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is when you look at this is looking at the 7-day window. Part of AVID is not just the Giving Tuesday. We have a trailing 12-month benchmark as well. And so I wanted to understand, we're up for revenue, we're slightly up in donors. How does that compare? When you look at the 12-month window, is this a reflection of a bigger trend, or is this a microcosm, really? And so when we flipped over, a lot more revenue, 12 billion in revenue, 25 million in donors, and we start looking at the giving trends, trend-wise, we're seeing it nearly flat in terms of revenue. So while we were on Giving Tuesday up in revenue, it's been relatively steady, and only basically roughly even slight growth in donors, which does mirror Giving Tuesday, but different when you factor in the revenue side of things.
Right. I mean, even already, and I know there's lots more data to get to, but it does seem already like we're seeing pretty different giving behavior this year than maybe is typical, which is fascinating to see that there's trends that are shifting and changing. And I know we'll look at that as we get deeper into even like acquisition sources and that sort of stuff too. But well, let's just to highlight a couple more things there. I mean, what other like big anomalies, things you would have expected to see this year that didn't quite go the way you thought?
So I did break this down. I have a good chart to show it. The donors you're seeing at 3% growth is kind of a blending across the verticals, but the reality is the individual verticals had wildly different results. The religious vertical, those in faith-based nonprofits, saw a 18% increase in number of donors, whereas health and human services was down 7% compared to the past.
Interesting.
I do think Dale just mentioned it. Do you think the election impacted results? There's no way. I can mention it this way. Once we entered the election, I'm going to use Facebook as an example. The world has changed so much. The CPM on Facebook for the nonprofits we're advertising to saw a roughly 30 to 40% increase, meaning to reach the same number of people, it costs 30% more. Now, normally after an election, it usually goes back down because there's so much election buying ads. This year, it hasn't. It's stayed relatively steady. So there's no way the election's not impacting results as it comes down to.
Yeah. So what the things that would impact as it relates to like Giving Tuesday, just to unpack that for people, would be the cost of things like if you're running ads to go target existing donors and let them know about the campaign and the reasons to give, it costs more to go reach them. So your budget doesn't go as far. If you're trying to use it as an acquisition play and you're running all sorts of different acquisition campaigns around it, same sort of thing. It costs more to go acquire a donor because it costs more to go reach people in the first place. So any other thoughts on that? I mean, it basically just means your budget doesn't go quite as far.
It doesn't. The one thing I was talking to a few of our account managers, account leads here at Next After, and they said one surprising trait this year that was different than the years prior. We always launch our direct ask ads. It's Giving Tuesday, give a gift. We usually try to launch it 7 days-ish beforehand to give it some time to learn and be able to go big. This year, the best performing ads were not Giving Tuesday, give now. They were offers. They were for our faith-based, like downloaded devotional. For our health and human services, we had like ebooks for informational or pledges, whatever the like is. Those raised more money than asking for money, which is different than what's happened in the past, because usually Giving Tuesday allows us to ask for money and get it.
Right. That's really interesting. I see some comments even on the Facebook, the conversation here. Heidi's saying that, maybe a big part of the drop was a lack of matching funds via Facebook. We see, there's another Facebook comment here. Jennifer is saying our Facebook and Instagram giving was way down. So some anecdotal feedback that may be a contributing factor to those that we're seeing declines in performance.
It's also a good note just in general of this is why we build our own audiences. If you have to rely on Facebook to post an ad and hope it gets shown, you're going to be in for a world of hurt when these kind of things. We acquire email files. We cultivate email files for days like this. Our COO, Greg Klunga, always puts it as throughout the year, it's like a piggy bank. You keep putting it in, you keep putting it in, and year ends the day that you break that open and make the ask.
Yeah. And I know it's a fun lunchtime conversation that, many of us at Next After have had for years of like, okay, Facebook goes away. What do you do? So probably an exercise, maybe around. Hopefully not. That's the point, is to have a plan so you don't panic. It may be a good mental exercise over if you can get some time to think over these holidays coming up. What would be your plan if Facebook or your normal advertising channels suddenly just went poof in the next year? I see some comments in here. Someone saying it'd be easier to compare results of the last presidential election year. Wasn't the wild 2020 outlier? It does seem like every election cycle is an outlier at this point too. So it's real hard to compare what's going to happen, every 4 years, but certainly there's impact.
I'm going to scroll real fast. I tried not to do that, but I did want to make that point because I found we have 2020. You see like change in revenue, 51% increase. I don't think it was the election. I think it was COVID. 31%. I mean, you can kind of see all the how the ebbs and flows and things change. With can't go back to 2020.
Right. There are a few things that happened in 2020 that could impact all that stuff. This is all super fascinating, Kevin. Let's talk about the acquisition side, because we've touched on it a handful of times. Let's dive straight in. We said up front, a lot of people talk about Giving Tuesday as being a big acquisition day, and there has been data to support that in the past. What happened this year? Did we see acquisition grow? I know the answer, so I'm leading you here.
I love the leading questions. Thank you, Nathan. I'm so glad you asked. So new donors who we acquired this year, doesn't mean we were acquired today. They were acquired this trailing 12 months, represent 1 out of 4 donors. What we call key multi-year, people who have given 3 or more years, represent half of the donors. So they kind of fall in after that. So new donors is a big part of Giving Tuesday, being at the 24%. But what we ended up seeing on this one, of those donors that were giving, the most of them weren't acquired on Giving Tuesday. They had been previously acquired, and this was their second gift, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it shows that I've worked with organizations who said we need to suppress all of our new donors. I don't want to over ask. But the reality is there's enough studies published at this point in time that the faster you get the second gift, the longer they stick around, the higher the lifetime value.
Yeah.
This is the opportunity for that option.
Well, just to, sit on that point for a moment. That's something that we've been talking about a ton this year as we talk about retention and how to, retention can be an elusive metric. How do you know that, what impacts retention, which you can measure 3 years down the road? How do you know what you did 3 years ago is actually impacting retention, or if it wasn't a million other things? But that has become like one kind of key metric that you can practically optimize for today, which is how do you get that new donor to give at least one more gift in their first 12 months? And it seems like Giving Tuesday is becoming a great day for that kind of reactivating within your first year, which has huge implications for their retention rates.
I think the way I'd frame it, it's not necessarily, it is Giving Tuesday, but what makes Giving Tuesday unique, it's a catalytic event. It's an event that has a deadline, that has a date, and that's really what gets the conversion. Year end is going to have the same thing times 2, I'm going to guess. We'll find out in a month, I guess. But the other thing that's worth noting, though, is the key to success with it is not asking earlier. There's an initial stewardship cultivation, but making sure you acknowledge that it is a new donor and it is a new gift, and that you put their first gift to use. Saying, give me another gift right away without acknowledging their first is usually going to get you a frustrated donor, not a second gift donor.
Right. That's something we talk about often when we talk about building your year-end plan. Like when people haven't spent much time working on a year-end communication strategy and you get started in September, well, the impact of your year-end plan is so dependent upon what you have done the whole rest of the year to cultivate these donors, steward them well, build relationships. You can't always just turn it on in an instant. So that cultivation piece throughout the year is so critical. I see a bunch of comments in here. I mean, seems like the email problem is a big conversation point for many people. So I think you've touched on something there. Kim is saying we had a big spam problem this year. People found our messages in their spam folder. Open rates were much lower than last year. We've got Amy is agreeing wholeheartedly. Yes, we've been working through sending Outlook messages to our donors each day, but they're telling us they're finding them repeatedly in spam. That's something we can break down and even give some ideas for as we go here. But I just want to kind of affirm that lots of people are seeing this same kind of email issue where it's just harder at this point to go reach people in the primary.
Well, there are a couple of things. Let's hit on it here on the email side of things. I don't want to get too technical, as I'm often known to do. But there's a few things worth noting. One, you can't believe open rates anymore. Apple passed a privacy issue. They released a thing that it's all for privacy. So the way Apple is protecting your privacy is by opening all of your emails. This is not a lie.
When you put it that way, it doesn't sound that private.
It doesn't. It sounds slightly different. But it's not just like Apple emails. It's anybody that uses their iPhone to read their phone. Then what happens is Google downloads the images as a single image and then serves you those images. But what it does is prevents your HubSpots, your MailChimps, your Constant Contacts from actually knowing if you open. And so a lot of it is estimates these days. They exclude a lot of it. So at best, when we look at an open rate, it's a sample size of 30% of your email file. And they're saying that's what your open rate is. The other factor that can get into this is there are some changes that happened back in February with domain name DNS settings. In order to send an email, you have to have specially configured settings within your domain that proves you are who you're sending for. And so a lot of nonprofits have forgotten to do that and forgotten to update it. It's worth checking. I'll see if I can find the domain, a website that you can go check of have we set it up correctly. It's something that took a significant amount of effort for us back when that first rolled out.
Yeah. Another just quick note on that too. I mean, what we as email has changed so much in the past 5 or 6 years as more and more of those type of features have rolled out. I mean, sort of the common through line to make sure you still get placement in the primary inbox is to make sure that you're sending emails and communication sent from a human being that look like a human being. As we build programs, the primary thing we're trying to do is to go build a real relationship with the donor on the other end. We often say that people give to people, not to email machines. And so the more that we can emulate just one-to-one human communication in the inbox, but doing it at scale, it not only leads to better, conversions and donations and engagement, it is a primary way to make sure that you are visible in the inbox and don't end up in spam. It's not a guarantee, but it certainly helps quite a lot.
Agreed. And the other thing that you can do on that, the technical reason behind that, Gmail, Yahoo, they look for the ratio of code to words. When I send a regular email out of my inbox, there's code behind it that makes it look like what it does. When you send it out of your MailChimp, there's a lot of code that makes it look like what it does. Those templates are indicator to number one to Gmail that you aren't a real human.
Right. Well, Kevin, what else have we seen on the acquisition side? I know we derailed there to talk about email for a moment. I'm glad we did. Let's jump back on. What else are we seeing on acquisition?
So the other factor on this one that I thought was fascinating, when we looked at new donors who were acquired on Giving Tuesday, I heard this this was a year ago, 2 years ago, I can't remember. Somebody made the pitch that so many people are going to use this as an opportunity to acquire sustainers, get recurring gifts. And what we saw was when we looked at the new donors who joined on Giving Tuesday, 95% of them gave one-time gifts. 5% of them gave a recurring gift. It's not to say people might not have asked. There's a lot of motivations that go behind it. But in general, when you ask for a recurring gift, you are going to get less donors. And so this is one of these times where I always like to tell people to be cautious on the recurring gift ask, because when there's a high motivation to give, basically get out of their way and allow them to donate. We can do recurring donations at a later time and recurring acquisition.
And there's a ton of things you can do as you follow up with those donors that have come in. Go cultivate them. You can even within the first 30 days, we've got lots of training around how you build a new donor welcome series. And part of that play is, cultivate them well, onboard them, welcome them, and give them the chance to become that sustainer, even within that first month. And that can be highly effective. But so there's other ways to go acquire it, even if it's not like on the day of.
I do want to point out, Chris in the chat just put it in a good place to go check your domain checker. For those that don't know, Chris is my replacement at Next After when I moved over to Avid. So even my replacement is helping keep things moving.
He's on top of things. I love it.
He's keeping my job going.
He'll love this. But if you got any technical questions, go shoot him to Chris Nexner. He can help you out.
Great. Yeah.
He's live and with us for live technical support. All right, Kevin, keep going. What else we got?
So we saw that new donors represent 24% of the donors that gave on a single day. When you compare the number of new donors compared to prior years in terms of how many we acquired, this year was down 28% in terms of new donor acquisition. So far less donors were acquired this year than in the years past. But I will say, when you go back, we were on a steady growth curve. 2022 saw a 26% increase over 2021. 2023 saw a 7% over 2020. So it's been steadily growing. And even 2021, it looks bad. That's still 243% better than it was in 2019. So keep that in mind. So this may be just more of a coming back to normal, or this might be a tapering off of the new donor acquisition growth for Giving Tuesday is just becoming less of a thing. But pointing to the email, pointing to Facebook that we talked about, it might just be a culmination of multiple factors, really.
Yeah. Well, all the acquisition stuff here is just fascinating. And again, I think it's just supporting that kind of larger narrative that just giving behavior is changing, and that's okay. We can't stop it from changing, but we have to be able to look at data like this to go figure out what's happening, and then how do we go adapt our strategies to make the most of it. And again, these conversations just about email and how we do that better, I think, is just a good testament to people are always looking and currently are looking for how do we keep improving, how do we keep getting better. Larry, I see your comment and your question about the kind of plain text email tactic. I'm going to star that kind of in my notes here, and we can come back to that and we'll answer that question.
I would also like to star, where was it here? Sheila's question. Nathan, where did you get your shirt? Start. Well, we
Well,
want them to stay till the end, Nathan. So you got to really hold out.
great. And can I find an affiliate link real quick? We'll see. um, well,
Right. Other thing I wanted. Let me get back to the data.
let's do it. Where do you want to go, Kevin?
We're getting out. This is the most off the rails webinar we usually do, Nathan. So let's see what we can do to keep it slightly on. Okay. The other kind of fun trend I noticed on this one, when we look at the donors who gave, how did they compare to, or did they give last year? What we saw is this year, 23% of the donors who gave this Giving Tuesday gave last Giving Tuesday, which means 75% of these donors are new to Giving Tuesday. That represents a couple things. One is that's opportunity of saying, well, what happened to my donors from last year? Are we following up? Are we talking to them like we know they're Giving Tuesday donors, which is a good opportunity. But the other factor on this, and what's not shown in the chart, is this is a significant decrease. The average number of donors who usually give to Giving Tuesday every year is 38%. Usually it's only 2 out of 3 donors are first-time Giving Tuesday donors. This year it dropped pretty significantly. I think I'd land on it just saying this is a segmentation opportunity. If you could talk to somebody who you know gave last year on this exact date, what would you say differently than that you have to explain what Giving Tuesday is and why it's important?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating stat. And it's a good one to look at even just beyond Giving Tuesday. I mean, for any kind of high urgency campaign you're running, that sort of thing, to try to understand those giving behaviors and what's causing people to choose to give again, even within the same year, all that sort of stuff. There's great insights you can start to draw from that. Do you have any thoughts, ideas as to why that might be happening?
I think some of it might be exactly what they were talking about in the chat, where if your email's not getting delivered, then the people who gave you last year aren't seeing the communication this year.
Yeah.
So there might be some factor on deliverability. There might be some factor on fatigue as well of, have we been doing enough cultivation stewardship leading up till now to keep them engaged and to keep them giving?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's something we've been talking about the past couple months, just in various year-end trainings, is just the impact of like multi-channel communication and not being so siloed and isolated to just email as a channel or just direct mail or even just those two together. But how can you go layer in, branded advertising and that sort of thing to create visibility? Even there's a very simple experiment we ran about a month or so ago for an organization where they layered in an SMS campaign over the top of their campaign. It was just like a single message. And that, I forget the exact number. I want to say it was a 27% lift to the campaign by just layering in an SMS text to create that additional touch point and visibility. And especially during a really chaotic season where you're not just competing with changing policies around email. You're not just competing with other nonprofits on Giving Tuesday. You're competing with the entire for-profit industry as well during the month of December, that all is looking for a share of your wallet. So using these different multi-channel approaches can be another way to kind of break through some of that noise and stay visible.
There was another interesting anecdote I heard from one of our account managers who mentioned he tried a different strategy this year. Now, people worry about emailing too much, which is a concern.
Yeah.
But on the day of Giving Tuesday, he sent 3 emails. There is email 1 in the morning, which was, it's Giving Tuesday, give us a gift. Email 2 around noon was, here's an offer for you. An ebook is a download. I know Giving Tuesday is about giving back, but we want to give back to you, kind of messaging. And then a 3rd email that's, hey, it's Giving Tuesday. It's almost midnight. Give now. Or roof is on fire. Need your help, kind of thing.
Yeah, 8x match. You can now give 10 times the amount of whatever, backpacks, shoes, schools, goats.
The number 1 email out of those 3 was the offer. The soft ask, we want to help you, because after they downloaded that ebook, they got to a donation page. Now, that's not to say only send that email, because they also got donors on the left side and the right side. It's a good reminder that donors have different motivations.
Yeah.
Some will give because you ask. Some will give to help you put the roof that's on fire out. Some will give as a way of saying thank you, the reciprocity aspect of philanthropy.
That's such a good note. And I think it's a really underutilized approach that I'm sure many people today on this live stream could really benefit from? How do you use those content offers as a means of driving towards that level of gratitude and giving back through a gift? Well, Kevin, where I want to make sure that we get to today, as I'm looking at time, we got about 20 minutes, just under that, till the top of the hour. What does this mean for the rest of the year-end season? I know it's hard to just look at a single giving day and then go make massive predictions about where things are going to end up, but would you for us?
Sure. Step one, panic. No, I'll say it this way. So we have, as part of our benchmarks, we have our full year-end benchmarks. And what we do for this one is we start back on November 15th, just so we have a static point in time and everything is mirrored day to day. We're not even halfway through. And the reality is, Nathan, I believe you know the stats that we looked up for last year. What is it? What percentage of revenue comes on Giving Tuesday? What percent comes on?
Yeah, we saw last year, at least, we saw 5% of year-end revenue on Giving Tuesday. Check my memory here. And it was something like 14% came in on the 31st, and an additional 32% came in that week leading up to December 31st.
So to put it another way, the next, call it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, are 6 times more important than the week we just came from.
Yeah.
So this is a great time for reflection, because right now we're just looking overall at the same time periods. If you look at the November 15th through the 6th, we're down on donors, we're down on revenue. Now, there's gift processing, there's things that come into this that might help us catch up.
Yeah.
But what I would suggest on this one is look at the messaging used on Giving Tuesday. Did it resonate or did it not? Because if it didn't resonate, there's still time to change. Giving Tuesday is a great experiment time to figure out, does our messaging work? Usually what we do with our year-end campaigns at Next After is we plan it all out. We plan experiments, what we're going to do here and there. Message testing comes first. And then by the time we get the 28th, 29th, 30th, it's tactical. It's thermometers versus not thermometer versus the things that move at 5 to 6%. And so it's a good time now to look at what we sent and say, is it the right thing? How would I change it? What would I do different?
Yeah. That is one of the best blessings of Giving Tuesday. I think sometimes
and money. That's the second best blessing of Giving Tuesday.
Yes. I was going to say, sometimes I think we can get a rap for being down on Giving Tuesday because we often talk about how much more revenue is at stake, but it is such a critical giving day in the season. It's not 5% of year-end revenue is not nothing. It's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is this great little litmus test to see kind of where are we at? How are we doing? Might we need to change course? And I know it's in the past now, but moving forward, using that as a great day to go launch an A/B test and experiment to see what should my messaging be as we go approach the rest of the year.
And it also works well, especially for our smaller nonprofits where they can't really run an A/B test to figure out, does this work or does this work? Because you can compare this year versus last year. And while there's a lot of factors, you can know am I on the right track versus last year?
Yeah. I see Josh just asked a question. Why are we down for the first time in 5 years? I would actually say, according to the Giving Tuesday, their official stats that they are putting out, they actually said that last year was the first time that they plateaued. Giving Tuesday plateaued.
This is looking at all of year-end, not Giving Tuesday. Keep that in mind. He's asking about the year-end side of things.
I see. Well, what are your thoughts there, Kevin, on why we might be down? I saw some different things in the data I'm curious about, but I'd love to know your perspective.
As I'm looking at it, it's very early to claim we're down. So let's focus first on the donors, then we'll look at the revenue, because the reality is, even on here, let's see if I can find it real quick in terms of get major donors versus non. I don't want to scroll too far, otherwise I'm going to lose people. This is largely driven by major donor revenue, and being an election year, I think people hold back the major donor revenue until they have far more certainty on what's happening. So I think revenue may catch up if it's driven by majors. Now, year-end donors, the way I would frame this is this has been steady growth. So this is a 5% growth on a 26% growth, a 9% growth on a 5% plus 26%. It becomes a compounding factor that it's hard to keep growing. Giving Tuesday obviously helped a little bit on the catch-up period. But I think more than anything, it becomes a challenge just to make sure we finish strongly now, knowing all the other factors that are playing into it. email wasn't delivering as well. What do we need to do later? Do we need to split our email list, send smaller? One tactic we often will use if we have an email engagement issue, send to all your emails that have opened, and then 30 minutes later, send a new email to everybody else that's identical to the first. Gmail and Yahoo will see that as the same email and give you better inbox placement because it got opened real quickly. And it's kind of a hack to get around some of those other factors.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, I know there's a lot happening as we look at like the full year-end picture. One thing I was really curious about that I'd love to know your thoughts on is just like the amount of people that are starting to give in online channels. It seems like that continues to grow year over year. Is that what you're seeing in AVID data, and why do you think that's happening?
We actually see it here, yes. So you look at what proportion of in this case, new donor acquisition, where is it coming from? We're continuing to see that growth. I think a lot of it because we're getting shifting budget to digital. We're getting younger audiences. I'd say younger. The average age hasn't really changed, but the technical savviness of our donors has. And so I think it just continues to compound. We're just getting to the point where a handful of organizations are seeing more online gifts than offline gifts in terms of broad base.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible. Even just looking at that chart, like those aren't small increases year over year. Like over the course of 4 years, you're going from 35% to 58% of those donors are giving online. So that transition is happening really fast. I know we said at the very beginning of this year, as we launched a whole benchmark report, we're basically seeing, if the trend line keeps up, on average, online giving may surpass offline giving within 5 years, 6 years time. So we're for those who haven't started investing in building a digital program, I mean, the best time to start doing that was 15 years ago, but the second best time is now. So,
wow, a little shade there, Nathan.
I'm just trying to point out, it's happening really fast. Beth is asking.
Keep in mind, Nathan was in high school, maybe middle school 15 years ago. So
you're right.
Why weren't you saying it back then, buddy?
I just didn't have a platform. I was in middle school. None of my friends cared about fundraising.
Oh, those guys were weird.
Beth is asking if you could restate that email hack that you mentioned.
Sure. So the way this works is, and I'll give a little context, Gmail, Yahoo, all those major email providers, they will show your email more if they know people engage with it. And so while you press send and you expect it to show up in the inbox immediately, for large volume senders, it can take 2-3 hours. So Yahoo looks at a trailing time period. And if you previously had been inboxed and the people that they sent it to weren't opening it, they may not be as likely to deliver the later files to the inbox and may move it to promotions or spam. So what we do to get around that is we'll send to the highly engaged email file. The people that I know, we call them our cat clickers, the ones that click on every single thing you send them. So we send that segment first and then call it 15 minutes, call it 30, just not too long. Send the rest of your email file, the same email, same subject line, same body copy, all that. And it's going to get a better placement in the inbox because Gmail and Google want to send highly engaging emails to their users.
It's a great hack. Thank you for unpacking that, Kevin. We'll have to do some write-up on how to actually go pull that off for people. I would love to, like the last note I jotted down that I'd love to hear from you about is just like recurring giving and what's happening there. It seems like there's a lot more recurring giving happening, at least in this data set this year. And what do you see in there and how do you think that's impacting results?
Well, I think the recurring giving information, the whole year end is similar to what we saw with Just Giving Tuesday. The donors being acquired are not recurring. But what's happened is recurring giving has become so much easier and so much more prevalent that they are just a part of the year-end strategy. And these are just people who had previously given recurring gifts that happened during the year-end period. And so it kind of gets counted in the mix with the rest. And so it's less to say that Giving Tuesday is driving more get recurring. Instead, I think what's happening is there's a lot more recurring donors than there were in their past. And their gift date just happens to fall during Giving Tuesday.
Yeah. So you almost have this kind of steadying of when revenue comes in, and that certainly, especially if you've just recently invested in a recurring program, that might skew this year's results versus last year's results. But there's plenty of data to show that the long-term impact of an investment in that program is by and large the way to go in terms of increased value, increased retention over time.
Let me pull out. Douglas made a good comment here. I think it's worth discussing a little bit. So Douglas pointed out that even given the opportunity to give online, the majority of our constituents have still chosen to send us a check in the mail this year. That doesn't surprise me. It stinks if you're in Canada where mail isn't getting delivered right now.
Yep.
But
for our Canadian friends who are going through it right now,
my heart goes out to you guys. But what we're seeing on this one is it's worth mentioning. Just because someone gives a check doesn't mean they're not influenced by the digital. There's a chart. It's one of my favorite charts we've built out in AVID because we blend email data with donor data. What we found is on average, this is not a benchmark I've published yet, but I can just give you looking across 5 to 10 clients. Those that receive email have a nearly 30 to 40% higher retention rate of those that don't if they're able to receive email. I'm not talking about people we don't have an email for. We know we're always going to be more valuable if you have digital, but what is often happening is we're specifically excluding disengaged people because every email platform out there will tell you don't send to people if they don't open or click on your email because it's wise, it affects deliverability. What they should add is a caveat that says don't send to disengaged people unless it's Giving Tuesday or the year end, because even if they haven't opened it before, they will today and they're likely to click and give. And so it's the digital side of things of like, we need to make sure people are getting communications and also being aware that digital communications influences far more than just digital giving.
Yeah. And that's, I referenced that an experiment earlier about, running branded advertising over a campaign. We've seen that many times over at this point. If, without sending additional emails or something, you go just take your direct mail file, you go plug them into a tool like Facebook and run some advertising to even say as clearly there's something on its way to your mailbox that could actually lift the overall conversion rate of your direct mail campaign. So it's understanding, I think, that donors don't live in a channel. They're people. They interact with what's in front of them. And that might be a Facebook ad that shows them that, hey, I should go check my mailbox. And it primes them for those appeals that are going to go hit later on. So understanding how those channels work together, even if you're not attributing revenue to the Facebook channel, it's still coming in through direct mail. Well, Kevin, we've got about 5 minutes until the top of the hour. I'll put a slide back up just one more time. So if you want to go ahead and get access to this Giving Tuesday and year-end live benchmark report, you can use this over the duration of the rest of this season to go get data insights on what's working and what kind of the state of year-end giving is. So you can get this clean comparison of how you're doing compared to the rest of the data set. And that's totally free for you to sign up for. And we'd love for you to go. I'm trying to find how to switch my screen over. Here we go.
There it is.
Scan that QR code or go to nextafter.com/avid and go sign up for a free account. Plus, you can dive deeper into the full tool set that AVID provides to go get all the insights that you need to go drive your program going into 2025. We start a couple of questions. Feel free, if you've got other questions you want us to answer, to go ahead and drop those in the chat. I think Larry has a clarifying question. He says, sounds like you're saying the Giving Tuesday is definitely a day to send to otherwise disengaged email constituents, not just during year end.
Correct.
Correct.
The way I would frame that is you want to be cautious about sending to disengaged. You should always give the opportunity to send to disengaged, though, meaning once a month, every other month. Make sure people who haven't unsubscribed have the opportunity to re-engage. But when you hold back people on key giving days, you will lose revenue. Mm-hmm. And so if you got them, send them. Those are the days that, again, you crack open that piggy bank and give it a try.
Kevin, I've been asked this question a few times this week, and I'll ask it to you. If someone gave on Giving Tuesday, should you continue to communicate with them through the rest of the year-end season, or should you suppress them?
Well, yes, Nathan, I think you should. Benchmarks on average. I love when you tee up these questions.
It's come up a handful of times, and so I wanted to make sure we address that too. Like, these people may very well give again.
5% will actually.
There
5%
you go.
of the people during year end give at least 2 gifts.
So Kevin's got the data to say you shouldn't go suppress all these people from everything through the end.
You should talk to them differently. You should thank them for their prior support. You should frame the communications as an update on the campaign that they have shown that they're passionate about. But denying someone the opportunity to give is just mean. Just mean.
Yeah. And I always like to say, go put them in all the cultivation that you're going to send. Make sure they continue to see the impact that that gift is going to make. And then also send them that appeal on the 30th and the 31st and give them the chance. Otherwise, you're taking that opportunity away from someone to potentially give in a meaningful way to something they care about. Larry's blowing us up with questions. So I'm scrolling up to another Larry question and maybe avoiding the Sheila question for the moment.
Coming back to Sheila question.
We're going to land there. So Larry's saying, he's asking about experiments related to email. He says, I know I've seen Winston experiments. Shout out to Winston. On simple email formatting, how would you summarize the approach? Is the plain text tactic inherently better? I'll put up on the screen here so you can see. Or does it matter more who's the sender? The summarizing the approach is we want to communicate with real humans in the inbox. That is the ultimate goal. We want to go build relationships. Again, I said this phrase earlier, but people give to people. And so we need to figure out how do we go scale the relationships that one of your giving officers might have with major donors, and they call them every now and again, and they have conversations. They know what's going on in their life. They have these relationships. We're trying to figure out how to do that at scale with broad-based donors as well and beyond. And so that really is the summary of the approach. We're using email as a tool and a means to go build better relationships, which encompasses sending emails that look like I sent you one out of Gmail. It means sending emails that sound authentic and human and use warm conversational tone. It also means it should be sent from a person. Now, who's the best sender? You can kind of play with that. Sometimes it actually is really helpful to go vary your senders now and again to kind of interrupt what could become expected in the inbox. And maybe it's a surprise to people to see, oh, this person's reaching out to me. I want to go see what they have to say today. We've also seen some experiments where even talking about the same exact topic, it's more effective to send from someone who's a little bit closer to the subject matter than it is to just send from maybe the CEO or the president of the organization. So those are all things you can play with and levers that you can pull. But the approach ultimately is, how do we communicate like a human and build a real relationship? Because people give to people at the end of the day.
We actually have there's a good experiment we ran, and this is in general, if you change your sender, you will get a better open rate. It's a one-time use tactic that's great to employ just because it's a new thing. You will also get a lot of people complaining to you saying, I didn't know who this person was, so I didn't respond. Go by results, not by complaints.
It's a good word. It's easy to listen to the loudest voice of the inbox, but that doesn't always represent the whole. So, all right, it is the top of the hour. The final most burning question is apparently, where did I get my shirt? I don't think I can say the domain name because it has a not safe for work word in the domain. So Sheila, feel free to send me a direct message on LinkedIn, and I'll send you the link where you could potentially find it. It may be gone at this point, but I'll send you a link if you send me a direct message. Any parting words? I'm glad that's where we ended. Kevin, any parting words from you today? Any encouragement to the folks joining us today?
Good luck, everyone. You guys are doing amazing work. This is the most stressful time of the year, both personally and professionally. And you get to the end, and it's always going to be worth it because you'll have helped your nonprofit and you'll have made hopefully millions upon millions of dollars.
Let's hope. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Kevin, for giving us some time today to walk us through all this data. We wish you all the best the remainder of this year-end season. Whether you had a great Giving Tuesday or not so great Giving Tuesday, there's still tons of opportunity over the coming few
Six times the number of opportunity, in fact, if we were to throw some numbers to it.
At least. So best of luck to you. We are rooting for you here at Next After and at AVID. If you got any follow-up questions, feel free to send us a note. We'll do our best to get back to you. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we will see you in the new year.
Outstanding.